welcome back to the Answer Is You podcast, where we discuss every week little topics on how to improve relationships. I'm a big believer that the moment we focus on what needs to be shifted within, we change our whole reality and all the relationships in it. So today I want to talk about gaslighting and what it reveals about ourselves, since this podcast is really focusing on seeing our reality as our opportunity to figure out what needs to be looked at, healed, and shifted within. So when someone is gaslighting you, what does it mean and reveal about yourself? This is the topic, and so I would like, as a start, to just simply define what does gaslighting mean. When someone is gaslighting you, they do not validate your reality. They do not validate how you feel. So this can look very different depending on the scenario, but at the very end, it's about you having a certain experience and someone else is not validating how you're feeling, or even more, is denying the way you feel things or the way you are viewing reality. Meaning, for example, if there is an experience and you feel hurt by your partner or someone in your family, a loved one, and they will twist it around so at the end, even though you were the one that got hurt in an experience, you are the one apologizing to them because they victimized themselves in that scenario. So you end up feeling sorry for even bringing it up. So it is a lot about twisting reality so people get confused and people internally shift toward feeling bad for even bringing up how they feel, for at the very end, for having a certain perspective on reality that might be different than the one your partner has, than the one a loved one has. So gaslighting is really, it is emotional abuse, and the closer the person is to you when it comes to gaslighting, the more detrimental it is for your mental health. So especially if it is a partner who is gaslighting you, over time this creates massive effects on your mental health. And this is because a partner is supposed to be our safe space. So if your partner is gaslighting you and you either do not recognize it as gaslighting, when someone, to come back to the definition, when someone is either not validating how you feel, saying you're bringing it up, your partner made you sad about something that happens, and they're just like, no, you're not sad, you're fine. Or even if you are upset about an experience and they twist it so long and make themselves the victim, so you end up apologizing for something that made you feel uncomfortable or that made you feel hurt, or not seen or validated, that creates internal shifts for you that are detrimental for your mental health. And especially if it's a partner that is gaslighting you, most of the time this is the person that is the closest to you and is constantly around you. So if someone like that keeps giving you the impression that how you're feeling is wrong, or an experience is different than you remembered it, or they even say that never happened, because that's like another thing. for people who are gaslighting you, they may also just say, oh, that never happened, or it never happened like this, even though you are very sure it happened. But over time, if that is not a one-time occurrence and we're not aware of it, or we do not want to see it, that leads to us stop trusting ourselves. And that leads to us trusting someone else more than we're trusting ourselves. And why is this so detrimental for our mental health is our body always reacts the same way. If there is a stress response because of an external experience that we are having, or someone is hurtful to us, the body always reacts with a stress response. So, of course, if someone is gaslighting you, internally our body recognizes this is not okay, and also this is not our reality. They may say that never happened, but I know and I feel it did happen, and I was not safe in that experience. But someone else is telling me I was fine, I was safe in that experience, but my body still knows I was not. But the problem is our brain operates differently. Our brain is it's like a big computer that just takes information in. So if we have a partner or a loved one, someone close to us who is gaslighting us, over time what it does, it repatterns our brain. Because if we're not stepping away from a relationship where gaslighting is happening, we teach subconsciously our brain that someone else is deciding how we view reality. Someone else is deciding how we feel about things. Someone else is here to tell us how we feel. So while our body recognizes this is not okay, this is not safe, I know how I feel, they cannot know because they're not me, our brain starts to repattern because we're staying. So that creates an immense amount of stress in the body because there's a disconnect between our brain and our body. And also internally, we always know our truth. But if we are in an experience where someone else is making us doubt our truth, is making us doubt ourselves, we disconnect more and more from our internal wisdom. We disconnect more and more from our body. And this leads, when it comes to mental health, many times around, it leads to depression, it leads to anxiety, it can lead to other diseases, just for the simple fact that we create an internal war between the brain and the body because we give our power to someone else. So coming back to what does gaslighting reveal about us? After we discussed the definition of gaslighting and what it does in the body, what does it reveal about us? When someone is gaslighting us, and that is not just happening once, it happens more often. And even if we are not fully aware of it, we can sense, and I can talk about that from personal experience because I experienced emotional abuse, and gaslighting is emotional abuse. Even though I was not really aware even of the term, I could just notice when there was conflict arising that I was always feeling like there was something wrong with me. Like I was not seen. And even if it's just that and not gaslighting, but just you not feel like your emotions are validated and your experience are not validated, it doesn't even have to be gaslighting. But if we talk about gaslighting here, if it is, what is telling us about ourselves? It is telling us that there is something within us where we do not trust ourselves fully. Because then we would not allow other people to step in and tell us that did not happen the way you experienced it, or you are not really feeling that way, or you should not be upset, or allow others to turn situations back on ourselves. Because if we trust ourselves and we have enough awareness and self-worth, we would stay in our power. We would question if someone in a conflict, and I mean, there's different types of conflicts, but if you are in a conflict and it always ends up to where someone is turning the whole situation around and is never at fault for anything, then you should pay close attention to it, because there is something wrong, because apparently they do not see their part in it. They just want to blame you. And as it goes for any relationship, we are always to 50% responsible for any interaction in our life. So also us, we can never push the blame away. But when it comes here to gaslighting, which is emotional abuse, and we go back to what does it reveal about us, it comes down to not trusting ourselves fully. It comes down to not having enough self-worth, not having enough awareness, or maybe not having enough confidence in ourselves. And I see that in my own journey too. The more I became aware of myself and what is happening in my body in certain experiences, I was more and more able to remain in my power, because I could just tell from experiences if they shifted my body energetically, negatively, I could just bring that up. And that does not even have to be gaslighting. It's just the moment something changes in a conflict or in any situation where you feel I'm not in my power, or I do not feel good about this situation, you can just bring it up and tell someone, this is how that makes me feel. It does not make me feel good. And if we come back to gaslighting, when someone would say then, but that's not right. You're fine. That is not the experience we're having here. That is just you being triggered. You can, if you're in your power, you can say, but this is how it makes me feel. And that's my truth, because I'm feeling this way. And I feel this is so important too, because many times around, we have a lot of past wounding, so we are triggered fast. So sometimes we might just question if our reaction is valid, because we are triggered and we notice that we might be internally moving back to an activated state and back to a reactive state where we might be in past wounding. So it might make sense to us, especially if we talk about gaslighting. Someone who's gaslighting, they most of the time know exactly our wounding. So they use that against us too. So if you have an abandonment wound or like a wounding from a past relationship, oftentimes they would bring that up too. They make that part of the conversation, being like, you are just reacting this way because of your childhood, because of that previous relationship. And that makes you question the way you feel. But your emotions, they're always valid. They are not to question from anyone and not from you. And I always like to bring that example. It's basically emotions. They're like any other thing that is happening internally. Even though we don't see it, it's still happening. I mean, if someone has a broken leg, most of the time from the outside, we don't see it's broken, but they feel it. They know it's broken. They cannot move their leg. It might not look like it, but they can definitely feel it. Same thing goes for emotions too. If we are sad, we feel sad because we feel sad. Same with the broken leg. Might not see it, but it's broken because it's painful. So why would we question the one thing but not the other thing? So you gotta learn to trust yourself. And if emotions are showing up, they're showing up for a reason. So I feel the biggest shift and the biggest revelation when it comes to gaslighting, it's really about us trusting ourselves, trusting our internal guidance, and trusting how we feel. And if someone is constantly making us feel empowered, or in my case, it was at some point, especially during conflicts, that I was always very angry, but I was angry because I was not seen. And there was someone who always wanted to take my power away. But to shift that, we have to trust, and we have to create self-awareness, and we have to learn to value ourselves more. And if someone is gaslighting you more than once, then you gotta walk away from them. If it's a relationship, maybe it's someone that you work with that you cannot walk away from because maybe it's a family member. But then it is up to you to create the boundary needed so you can still interact with them and feel safe. So I actually had one family member with gaslighting tendencies. So with that, as an example, if something would show up and it would not make me feel good, I would bring that up, how it made me feel, and they of course would not validate that, since that is part of gaslighting. But then I would stand in my power and say, but this is how I feel, so I know it's my truth. And then they would still not validate it, or maybe push it away. But then I started saying, well, if you do not validate how I feel, which is my truth, then this conversation is over. And in general, this is very, very powerful, a very powerful statement for anyone who's disrespecting you. It doesn't even have to be just gaslighting, but anyone who's disrespecting you when there's a conflict arising, you stay in your power and say, if you are not disrespecting me, if you are not respecting me, this conversation is over. And then you walk away, because then everyone knows that they cannot treat you in a certain way. And that is extremely powerful. I know this was a conversation more on the heavier side, and it's very close to my heart because I went through it. So I hope this was serving you, and I would love to hear from you, and see you in the next episode.